Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good morning, and I hope you are all set to participate in the side event of the 10th Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development on challenging gender-based violence in education and everyday life, a must in first tracking Agenda 2030. So from ASPE, we are very happy to welcome you all at this virtual side event. And what we will be doing is that in this event, we will reflect on three key areas: the forms of gender-based violence in education and the systems that perpetuate this human rights violation, what policies and gender transformative strategies are initiated by education movements towards zero tolerance for GBV, and how education institutions, families, communities can combat gender-based violence in education and ensure an improved, inclusive, violence-free education and society. So in the next 1.5 hours, we will be listening from our esteemed speakers, ASBE members from across the region, and we will hear from our youth coordinator of the youth perspective, And also, we will engage in an interactive discussion, interactive poll, Mentimeter, different ways of interacting among each other, and share our thoughts and inputs. But before we start the discussion, we would like to know who are all with us today. So, in this virtual meeting, let's introduce ourselves through a poll. May I request my colleague Lay to open the poll for all and request all of you to respond to the poll question. Thank you. Okay. Is it done? Lay,
Yes.
can you show us the results?
Okay.
Wow. Okay, so we have the maximum from Southeast Asia, 43%. We have East Asia, 14%. South Asia, right after Southeast Asia with 36%. From Central Asia, 7%. I'm sure we will get our colleagues from Pacific and someone from outside the Asia Pacific very soon. So thank you very much, all of you, for attending this poll. And now we have some idea from where all of you are coming in and you are joining this session. So uh, as we know that gender-based violence is the most extreme expression of unequal power relations in the society and one of the most widespread violations of human rights. While gender-based violence disproportionately affects women and girls, LGBTIQ, it also affects men and boys. These abuses take place all over the world, in homes, in schools, and any other education institutions, in workplaces, and also in communities. UNESCO reported that despite the government signing the international frameworks to protect children from all forms of violence, still children remain exposed to school-related gender-based violence, and not only school, but any other education institutions related violence. In Asia Pacific, in the report, it analyzed that gender-based violence is often tolerated and sustained by the institutions where the place where children are expected to be safe, protected, and empowered, unfortunately. So in 2020 and the years following the pandemic, the extent of the gender-based violence to children and youth and adults, especially to girls and women, have increased by many folds. Many learners have dropped out of school for different kinds of violence. Women have suffered further due to restrictions in their mobility and lack of access to information and access to the community learning sectors. Keeping this in mind, last year, ASPE initiated a collaboration with its members in 4 countries in the Asia Pacific region, across the region. So we had our Kyrgyzstan member from Central Asia, India joining from South Asia, Philippines from Southeast Asia, and Mongolia from East Asia to understand what is this gender-based violence, especially when it is in education, and also critically analyze its consequences, especially on accessing and continuing quality education for all. So in the next 1 hour, we will hear from our panelists. And our panelists are, can I share the screen? Yes. So I would like to introduce our panelists here. We have with us, um, just one moment. We have with us the youth coordinator of ASPE, Priyanka Pal, and also we have our member from Philippines, Civil Society Network for Education Reforms, Dariel Cruz, who is the research and communication specialist, who will be sharing with us the country experience from Philippines. Followed by, we have Tunggalog Dondung Dulam of All for Education Mongolia, who will also talk on the child and school-related gender-based violence. We have Archana Divedi, Director of Niranta Trust India, who will share with us some of the strategies on gender transformative education. And we have Masuma Bashirova, who is the Executive Director of Association for Education Development in Kyrgyzstan, who will share some of her lessons from, um, sh- from the country of Kyrgyzstan. So, um, so instead of much more time, what we will do is that we will hear from our youth coordinator Priyanka Pal, as we know that as we know that the gender-based violence is one of the key areas for young people. So what we did in the last few months is that we facilitated a dialogue within our ASPE youth constituency, where they shared their recommendations, their inputs, what are the challenges they face, and that will be shared by our youth coordinator Priyanka, who will share on behalf of the youth constituency of ASPE. So Priyanka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sushmita. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. I am Priyanka Pal. I am a youth coordinator of ASBE. And I'm really happy and looking forward to having an engaging conversation with you. But before we start with that, I would like to just give you a brief about what we are here for. And as Sushmita has already shared about the various gender based violence which usually happens in the education sector as well. Today, here we are focusing more on in school settings, which has a damaging impact on the education of millions of youth across the world. So, during the 20 years since the Beijing Declaration on Women's Empowerment, which was adopted, there has been increased activity and interest in addressing the gender based violence. We can go to next slide, please. But gender based violence in and around the classrooms and schools has largely been invisible. It is also because there has been lack of substantive data on such a crucial topic. In fact, for many youth, speaking on the issues related to gender based violence in education is difficult as there is hardly any platform, any safe space to discuss such a sensitive topic. Next slide, please. So, in the month of August last year, in 2022, ASBE conducted a regional workshop on education financing in Bangkok, wherein we invited from 6 different countries youth to attend the workshop. During this time, we also conducted a youth dialogue on gender based violence in education, where all the youth participated actively. Also, during our visit to Nepal and Bangladesh last year, we conducted these youth dialogues on gender based violence in education and discussed various issues and concerns while also receiving the suggestions as well as recommendations from the youth to address this issue. In the dialogue, we talked about various factors which contributes to the gender based violence in education and also its impact on the physical health, psychological factors, and also on accessing quality education. Right, you will see the list of the challenges which the youth have been in the youth dialogue. So young girls who are more vulnerable and have to face many challenges, especially from Nepal, Bangladesh, and India, shared that they often face the issues of eve teasing while walking towards school, because of which often parents force them to stop their education as a precautionary measure. A youth from Nepal also shared that girls are expected to help family in their household work, which again makes it difficult for them to focus on their education. Also, during the pandemic period, many young girls were forced to early child marriage and were dropped out of school, leaving their education in between. Youth from Bangladesh also added to it, saying that due to natural disaster, there is a lack of infrastructure, which again is a hurdle for youth to access education. However, boys are still given an opportunity to complete their education, but young girls often have to stay back at home. Even schools don't have a separate toilets for girls, which further discourages parents to send their young girl child to school for education. Even though major experiences pointed out that young girls had to face discrimination, exploitation, and in certain cases, even abuse, the youth dialogue also highlighted the challenges of young boys who are also vulnerable. Often, due to peer pressure, young boys are forced to showcase their masculinity in an unhealthy manner. Many of them also get into the habit of using substance, which often impacts their health and overall well being. During the conversation in youth dialogue, Youth pointed out various sites of which different gender discrimination and violence takes place, and also discussed the growing violence which youth face on digital platforms. Youth shared that one of the major factors for trolling is due to the perpetrator's ability of successfully remaining anonymous behind the fake profile and identity. Next slide, please. This itself provides them the power to cyberbully or troll the victims. Due to increase in technological advancements to access education since pandemic, such spaces can no longer be ignored, and therefore it is very vital and important to address this issue. Speaking of power, a youth from Timor-Leste highlighted that even though schools and classrooms have teachers hold the more power, but if teachers are female, then even the young boys often misbehave and pass comments, and in the classroom, making it really difficult for the female teachers to take lessons. Similarly, youth also identified who identify themselves from the LGBT community often have to face bullying, which has a massive impact on their psychological well-being, making it more difficult for them to continue their education, often leaving a big scar on their psychological well-being. Keeping all these factors in mind, it is highly important to implement appropriate strategies to make education inclusive for all. The elimination of school related gender based violence cannot be left to change for just for chance, and therefore more awareness regarding the gender based violence in education is required. Government, institutes, and schools, along with the civil societies and other development partners, as well as stakeholders, must take appropriate steps to protect youth from such a violence. During the dialogue, when youth were sharing these issues and concerns with regard to gender based violence and education, they also highlighted recommendations and suggestions for schools and government to implement, making the education more gender inclusive and equitable. If you go to the next slide, we will see the list of recommendations which the youth had shared. One of them was on conducting research to gather the robust data. The true scale of impact of gender based violence in education remains hidden due to lack of evidence. More extensive and robust data are needed, as well as comparative surveys and approaches of data collection needs to be explored. Developing a more gender inclusive curriculum. In order to create a gender inclusive environment at schools, the curriculum should include important aspects which creates awareness about gender based education along with sex education. It should also focus in understanding the gender intersectionality and bring sensible towards gender binaries. As stories are found to be more effective in getting the message across, you should be encouraged to read books about influential women and different gender identities, which they can emulate as their role models. Another one recommendation which was came across in all three different youth dialogues which we conducted was to train teachers. Teachers must be trained to respond to violence in schools and also encourage students to voice their emotions. For example, never tell boys big boys don't cry or you're acting like a girl. In addition to reinforce gender stereotype, that type of talking can actually be harmful. So if boys are cut off from honestly communicating hard feelings, the energy of the upset doesn't simply diminish or go away. It can drive misbehavior and also taint how a boy feels about himself and life in general. Teachers should never conform to the gender stereotypes by asking students to perform their duties as per their gender roles. For this, teachers can be supported by providing high quality training in all forms of gender based violence and also effective prevention strategies. Positive discipline methods must be mandatory for teachers and school administrators, which should be adequately funded by the government. Another recommendation which came forward was on the gender inclusive committee. This committee can play a very key role in engaging with teachers and students and influencing their behaviors. Next slide, please. The institutes or the community should support their community members to access appropriate training and support on the gender based violence in schools. The community can also help raise awareness, reinforce rights of the individual, codes of conduct, and positive discipline practices and advocate at a national policy level. Schools must have a clear code of conduct and ethical guidelines in place to ensure everyone is aware of the constitutes unacceptable behavior and understand how to report it. Such repercussions of violence must be clear, strict, and also be enforced in order to avoid a culture of silence. There is also a need to create a safe space by challenging the speaking of the gender stereotypes. School should be safe environment to learn and explore. Creating peer support group is also one of the recommendations which was highlighted. The mentor can lead the peer support groups in schools through a participatory approach. This safe space can only provide opportunity to create awareness about gender violence, but also become a peer learning group to discuss gender intersectionality and sexuality. Another recommendation which was highlighted was with regard to having a conversation with teachers and parents, including them in the awareness of gender equality and communicating with the parents at a regular intervals. Even counseling support at schools were recommended by the students so that they can have a safe space for them to talk about the gender issues or any issues they face in their journey of accessing education. Uh, it is clear that gender based violence in education is creating a dangerous learning environment for youth all over the world, especially for adolescent girls. However, it is important that school should be a safe space for young people, especially for those in marginalized and conflict affected countries. Therefore, it is for us to work together at a local, national, and international level to ensure better research is carried out to understand the scale and scope of gender based violence in education and to develop policies to implement the recommendations which the youth has shared. That's all from me. Thank you. Over to you, Sushmita.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. That was really excellent recommendations from the youths and also referring to all the challenges they have faced. And if we just look into a nutshell that first and foremost we need the evidences, we need the understanding of that if it's really a violence that is happening, sometimes we don't understand, we just take it as like normal. So we have to come out of this normalization of some of the violence that happens at the school level or any other institution, and of course including it in including it in sorry including it into the curriculum, and also of course capacity building of the stakeholders, including teachers and non-teaching staffs and everybody who are there in our education system. So thank you very much, Priyanka. I'm sure these are some of the great recommendations that we can take it forward when we talk about our advocacy strategies. So following this, may I please request our member, the coalition from Philippines, ENET Philippines, to share their country experience. ENET Philippines is a civil society network for education reforms and is a member of ASPE. We have with us Dariel Cruz, research and communication specialist from ENET, who will be sharing experiences from their initiatives on challenging gender-based violence in education. So over to you, Dariel,
Good
and
day,
you
everyone.
have 10 minutes.
Okay. Good day, everyone. I'm going to discuss how Philippines address gender-based violence in education. So let's first start with the overall country context. Philippines ranked 19th, down from 17th out of the 146 countries in the 2022 Global Gender Gap Report of the World Economic Forum. The drop is basically due to educational attainment, because while the Philippines ranked first in terms of literacy rate for enrollment in secondary and tertiary education, the enrollment in primary education decreased, with larger share of boys than girls in numbers overall. And while the 2021 high ranking is heavily attributed to the laws that promotes women's rights, the law enforcement here is very weak. Pre-existing discriminatory social norms are still tightly held by the community and law implementers. And nearly 71% of Filipino women have categorized education as one of the main aspects of their lives that the pandemic impacted most. And despite signing on to international agreements declaring intention to ensure the right to safe and quality education, violence on the basis of SOGSC or sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and sex characteristics in schools continues to be a serious problem. In fact, in school year 2021 to 2022 alone, the Department of Education or DepEd reported 7,800 cases of school-related gender-based violence or SRGBV. So what are the DepEd's initiatives in combating gender-based violence? They adopted Basic Education Development Plan 2030, which aims to provide an inclusive, effective, culturally responsive, gender-sensitive, and safe learning environment. It also aims to improve gender-sensitive contextualized curriculum and learning deliveries. DepEd also reiterated the strict implementation of gender-responsive basic education policy to enable them to undertake gender mainstreaming in education. And the Philippine Commission on Women developed updated Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Plan 2019 to 2025, which has special emphasis on addressing GBV through intensified campaigns. And one of the strategies is to accelerate the access of women from marginalized sector to education and training. And here in the Philippines, all agencies and local governments are mandated by law to allot at least 5% of their total budget for gender and development programs. The TESDA or Technical Education and Skills Development Authority prioritizes and empowers women through skills training and livelihood programs. The TESDA Women's Center provides programs which have traditionally been dominated by men, such as construction and welding, among others. 78.81% of female tech voc graduates were employed, which is slightly higher than male graduates with 78.36%. Philippines also shared efforts and challenges in innovation and digitalization at the UN Commission on the Status of the Women 67th session. Philippines' chairship of the CSW 68 in 2024, which is next year, affirms its commitment to pursue gender equality in all aspects of development process towards a gender-responsive society, both at the international and domestic fronts. But what are the main barriers to gender equality in education? An analysis of Filipino textbooks across a range of subjects found the following: gender stereotypes, general invisibility of diverse OGSC in learning materials, patriarchal and heteronormative beliefs. And there's no policy to support teenage moms' reintegration to school. There's a significant number of females quitting school due to pregnancy and early marriage. There's an absence of a comprehensive legal mandate to address discrimination against persons with diverse OGSC. And SOGSC bill remains to be the slowest moving bill for 23 years already. And in fact, nearly a month ago, the bill was referred back to Committee on Rules for further study, following concerns raised by a number of religious groups. So how do we challenge GBV here in the Philippines? In the Philippines in particular, we annually engage with education agencies and the Congress for higher and improved investments in education. And we submit alternative budget proposals for evaluation of the GAD plans, curriculum, and textbooks using gender lens. INET also brought gender lens in the main discussion during the 2022 National Literacy Conference. INET incorporates gender perspective in our national advocacy plan, and we adopt gender lens in our research and policy briefs. We conducted research forum on gender equality in education, conversations on women, gender, and education, and we invite reactors from academe and research institutions. So following all of this, a working group was formed among INET members and individuals from the LGBTQIA+ community to plan strategies to campaign for the passage of the SOGSC bill and to come up with recommendations to the Congress. And during celebration of Pride Month, INET released statements calling for the passage of the bill, and INET members and youth organizations also joined the Pride March. We also invited Senator Risa Ontiveros to discuss how the bill protects and human rights and ensures genuine equality and inclusion. We conducted consultations with various stakeholders to collate recommendations to address GBV. And INET member Unang Hakbang Foundation conducted a consultation with self-identified LGBTQIA+ children. Also, an INET member, Teachers Inc., conducted a write-up in integrating GBV and the strategies of ending it in the curriculum. So the output were lesson plans of the teachers in their particular unit. INET Member Parent Initiative for Social Awareness, Mainstreaming, and Advocacy, or PINASAMA, conducted a learning session on GBV. And it ended with an action plan discussion to improve their curriculum. So the daycare teachers committed to produce a one-day lesson plan and wanted to come up with a 10-month curriculum after their resource mobilization to gather support. INET also maximizes the online platform. We have Facebook Live programs, and each Facebook Live program is reaching more or less 1,000 views per episode. We have youth involvement and influence in the society, and program by and for persons with disabilities, and Senior City, or short for Senior Citizen, focuses on adult learning. So what has been the learnings and what further needs to be done? Involvement of various backgrounds in crafting laws is vital. All sectors should be well represented. And learning institutions are vital in molding the culture. It should be a safe place in the first place that promotes equality. We need to advocate for data and transparency on the occurrence of SRGBV and call for full and correct implementation of the Magna Carta for public teachers from a gender perspective, and increase INET membership among the marginalized, excluded, and vulnerable sectors. We need to continuously conduct sectoral consultations through focus group discussions and involve parents and their children, and incorporate all those recommendations shared in the consultations to the policy brief on SOGSC bill. Children and youth should be guided towards better understanding on gender, because if constantly exposed to stereotypes, children will grow up with biases that will be very difficult to unlearn. Hence, whether in basic, higher, or technical and vocational education, curriculum developers should be equipped and sensitized. And in INET Philippines, we say edukasyong sapat, ligtas, karapat-dapat para sa lahat, or safe, inclusive, equitable, and quality education for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. Always a very vibrant presentation and such good learning and recommendations. Thank you very much, Daryl. And wonderful to see like how you have taken it to different stakeholders within the children and young people and others living with disabilities, with LGBTIQ plus communities, and of course with the senior citizen, because sometimes we really don't understand, and this intergenerational dialogues are so important in these cases. And I think one of the major area that we can also learn from your initiatives is that how we can include this particular issue when we are advocating or when we are engaging in our local education group to talk on education sector plans, because that's one area which can affect and impact on the performances of the children and the young people in education. So thank you again, Daryl, for your excellent presentation. I would request everyone, whoever who wants to come up, maybe some questions are already in your mind, you want to know more. So we would encourage you to use the chat box to write your questions there. And we will see how we can get the responses from our presenters, and they can also write down the responses in the chat boxes in the considering the sensitivity of the time. So we have already heard two presentations, one from youth perspective and one from our Education Coalition from Philippines, how they have taken this at the ground level within different people they have been able to work through. This is a time for some interaction between our participants. So may I please call my colleague Thea Soriano to take forward the interactive discussions through her own ways. Thank you. Thea. Mhm.
Thank you very much, Smita. And for this interactive session, I would like to ask Clay, our colleague, to please put on the poll. Thank you.
Okay.
Colleagues,
We have heard that gender-based violence is deeply rooted in our school, in our families, in our communities, and also in the whole of society. Gender-based violence happens every day and in our daily lives. So we would like to ask you, although this is a very personal question, but at this point we would like to ask each and everyone this question: what kind of gender-based violence have you experienced in school or any education institution? Okay. So I hope you can see on your screen the poll. And in here, you can see the choices, whether you experience bullying, trolling, cat, cyberbullying, catcalling, like someone whistling at you when you walk on the street, or have you experienced stalking or sexual violence? Have you experienced being touched inappropriately? Anyone who experienced early marriage? Or maybe there are other experiences that you have experienced. And if you can just pick what is relevant to you, and then we will have a look at, among us, what kind of gender-based violence we have experienced. So, colleagues, please respond to the chat, and then we will see the results later. Yeah, so for the others, you can write in the chat box if that's fine with you. Otherwise, you can just put in others. Okay, have we all responded? Okay, 24 out of 32 responded. Now, okay, a few more seconds before we flash the results. Okay, so Lei, can you share the results of the survey? The poll. Okay, so 76% of us responded that we experience bullying. Yeah, bullying is also, as Priyanka mentioned, the perspectives of who, masculinity, femininity. Even we heard from the young people that girls bullying girls because they have this idea of how you should act as a girl or as a woman, and also of course boys bullying boys, and even the girls bullying the boys because they would have these perspectives of how masculinity is. So bullying for us, for all of us, has been an experience. 12% experience cyberbullying, trolling, yeah, and then many of us, 40%, experience catcalling, eve teasing. 20% said that they have been touched inappropriately, and then 12% said stalking, s- sexual violence, even among us, we have experienced, and 12% of us have experienced early marriage. So we can see, that really gender-based violence permeates our daily lives, and it doesn't, discriminate, young, old, we experience this gender-based violence not only in school, but also in our community, and even when we go outside of the community. So colleagues, thank you so much for sharing
your own personal experiences. Okay, so now I give back the floor to Susmita. Yes, we will share the result, Enam. And again, we heard two excellent presentations. So if you have comments and if you have questions, you can write them in the chat, and our speakers will be able to respond to you through chat as well. Now over to Susmita for our next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thea. And it's such a revealing because sometimes we really think and try to understand. Really, we had gone through such kind of violence at among in our school, in our college, or in other education institutions. So thank you very much, everyone, for sharing this very personal information, sharing among us, because this is like a family and where we really need to talk about it to understand better and address it. So from here, what we will do is we will go to our next speaker, who is Tungalak Dondungulam, who is from All for Education Mongolia. All for Education Mongolia has been working on education, right to education, and lifelong learning for many years. And they have specifically worked on child protection policies, and they have experiences of working with parents and schools and teachers to combat gender-based violence at the school level. So may I please give the floor to Tunga? Tunga, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Smita. Hello, everybody. And I would like to share with you our advocacy experiences and some achievements regarding this improving child protection policies at schools, with the involvement of parents and also children themselves. Should I share my PPT
Screen, yeah.
Yeah.
Tunga, you can actually share your screen.
Oh, okay.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. And of EFE coalition is comprised of 35 member organizations, and some of the member organizations have long years of experience and expertise in fighting, combating this violence and abuse in other settings, also in education settings. So our member organizations, they're generous enough to share their expertise and knowledge with the other coalition members, or with the strategies of the coalition to forward this issue last few years. So I would like to share their experience, their expertise also. In Mongolia, we have strengthened this child protection policy framework recently, since 2016. The Parliament of Mongolia adopted several laws regarding the child protection in different settings, including education. This law on rights of the child, law on child protection, family law, law on combating domestic violence, and a criminal code and law on infringement prohibits the use of any form of punishment, discrimination, harassment, or violence against children in many settings, including in the educational environment. So those laws expanded child protection system. They allowed us to introduce new services regarding child protection. This child helpline was introduced newly, and multidisciplinary teams were established at local levels. These legal committees on child rights started functioning at the provincial level, and now state child rights inspectors are working where they are needed. So schools were required to establish and use mechanisms for detecting and reporting cases of violence and refer the students who experienced violence to the multidisciplinary teams for the counseling and for other services also. And this prevention of bullying was also explicitly written in the laws. So this providing trainings for school teachers and other staff and creating non-violent safe environment for children, and also this prohibition of corporal punishment, this behavior change communication through counseling trainings, campaigns were also explicitly included in the laws. So then the next thing was those laws had provisions regarding the education sector child protection system. Minister of Education had to adopt some child protection policies, model policies and regulations, procedures to really implement those law provisions in the education law. But Ministry of Education were reluctant or very slow with those regulations. So AFE came in and we started advocating Ministry of Education to adopt those policies and guidelines required by the above mentioned laws. And as a result of this, we call it first round of advocacy to get those policies and regulations to be adopted by the Ministry of Education. So this called three kinds of documents were adopted by the Ministry of Education. In 2017, school child protection policy model policy was adopted. And next is procedure for preventing child abuse in educational institutions and dormitories. Mongolia has a large nomadic population, so children of those nomadic people usually stay in school dormitories to be enrolled in school. So safety and security is the main issue for those children staying in those dormitories. So always we say in schools and dormitories in Mongolia. The third document is procedure for continuing education for children victims of domestic violence. It was adopted in 2018. And those documents were adopted as a result of our advocacy, first round or first level of advocacy. But still, those most common child protection issues were persisting in the educational settings when we did this policy implementation review of those documents, especially school child protection policy implementation. Peer bullying is the most prevalent form of the gender-based violence and discrimination of the students who are ethnic minorities, who are children with disabilities, and also some girls and boys from poor families. And this abuse and bullying of dormitory students by dormitory teachers, by dormitory staff, and by also peer senior grade students abused or did some kind of bullying to the younger students. So still those problems were persisting. So we moved into the second level of advocacy. As I earlier mentioned, that this evaluation of implementation of child protection policies at school level was done in 2021. And those findings and the recommendations of this evaluation report were shared at the local level consultations, mostly organized by PTs at the schools, parent teacher associations at the schools, and also national level advocacy meetings. We presented the findings and recommendations of this evaluation with the education authorities in 2022. And also we developed this child protection risk assessment tool for schools to use in 2020 because schools really lacked any kind of tools or clear guidelines to implement those laws and policies adopted by the Ministry of Education. So we wanted to help to assist them, and the tool was developed. And using that tool, we conducted risk assessments at 90 schools in 2021 and 22. And based on the findings, child protection policies have been improved at the number of schools, especially in Ulaanbaatar. So we really wanted them to know that those child protection policy can be improved and upgraded based on the risk assessment findings. And next is we developed these guidelines for school level campaign prevention bullying 2020, and bullying prevention campaign using these guidelines was organized at 83 schools in 2001 and 2020. This tool was really successful activity for many schools, because schools really wanted, even when they wanted to conduct prevention, bullying prevention or violence prevention activities, they had no ready-made materials or planning tools, etc. So this guideline has many different tools. For example, the bullying register template, model bullying prevention guideline for the schools, etc. So schools successfully conducted the campaign. So the tool and these campaign guidelines attracted attention of Ministry of Education, the Department of Education. So they adopted it for the use at schools widely, and provided funding to AFE at least to work at 33 schools in UB. And then we signed MIO with Department of Education. And now more schools are using this tool, and more schools joined this year's bullying prevention campaign. And we are already suggested that Ministry of Education must conduct each year this campaign in November. And as a result of our work advocacy, 3 different documents were adopted by Ministry of Education in 2022 at the end of the year. One is procedures for prevention bullying at schools and dormitories, and second is guidelines for parental involvement in assessing school operations and activities. And the third is procedures for providing child protection services in educational environment. And the big win as a result of our campaign against gender-based violence, Ministry of Education revised the Code of Ethics for Teachers and included 2 really good provisions on prohibition of discrimination First, pregnant girls and adolescent mothers. We have been campaigning also for the right to education of pregnant girls and adolescent mothers. We had developed guidelines, we had policy consultations with the Ministry of Education and Child Protection Agency. And also the second provision in the Code of Ethics is also prohibition of discrimination of students based on sexual orientation and gender expression. So those were the wings of our advocacy in the last 6 years advocacy efforts. Now this we learned or we found successful strategies to involve parents and students at school level in the campaigns or in the activities combating gender-based violence or bullying at school level. First strategy was raising awareness was important because parents or students even didn't know that they were experiencing gender-based violence or any kind of bullying. So we did it through movie discussions, trainings for them, and raise awareness trainings were conducted for parents, and how to detect or identify or know that their children is experiencing bullying and violence at schools, etc. So we conducted trainings. And parents and students were involved also those risk assessment activities, teams, and they were involved also in child protection policy development processes at school level. So by doing this, they become more aware about the risks and violence cases and whom to appeal, how to solve the problems if their children or students themselves experienced the violence in school. And some schools organized very successful open day for parents. Parents came to the school and met with teachers, participated in different activities organized by AFE members or school teachers. And also schools allow parents to come during certain hours to meet with the school psychologists and ask questions. Interested them. And as a result of this risk assessment, we revealed that the students of certain grades were targets of the bullying or bullying prevalence was higher among them compared to other age students. So those campaign activities were directly targeted to 7 to 9 grade students. And students were involved in the campaign planning and choosing the topics, choosing the forms of the activities to be conducted during the campaign. And the students were really creative. They came up with very creative ideas using social media, posters, and also they did presentations, prepared and did presentations for other students on bullying prevention and on gender-based violence. And those are the posters, you know, trees and posters and different campaign ideas. And students together, we used those clubs and student organizations at the school level. So they together planned the campaign and they conducted and evaluated the campaign so together. So that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Tunga. Really appreciating the different tools and guidelines that you have been able to come up some really very good outputs, especially your work on how you got the revised code of ethics for teachers on prohibition of discriminating the pregnant girls from attending schools and continuing their education. So thank you very much. And I think these tools and guidelines are very good resource materials for most of our members who would like to take this work forward. There can be possibility of adoption. So I'm sure if they are available in English, then we can really share with all our members for their benefit. And also how you engage the parents and the children in this whole process, because it's very important to engage them, because it's for them. It's how they are experiencing and how they can actually share their views and participate in the whole process. So thank you very much, Tunga, again.
Welcome.
Yeah. We will now move to our presentation from India. And we have with us Archana Divedi, who is the director of Nirantar, a center for gender and education. And they are working for many years in India, mainly focusing on gender and education, and working with different stakeholders, working with different communities. So, sorry. Yeah. Okay, this is some technology that always blocks us. So over to you, Archana. Do you want to share the screen or do you want us to share it?
Thank you, Sushmita. I will share the screen.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Archana. And you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Sushmita. I will try within 10 minutes. Thank you. I think this is a very important issue that we are discussing, and I would particularly like to bring it in the context of India, that gender-based violence in the context of education is not something that we are very actively working on, but there are different kinds of campaigns and work that is going on. And I will try to summarize based on our experiences and experiences of our partner organizations working on these issues. So, is my presentation visible?
Yes, Archana, if you can put it in slide mode.
Yeah, I'm trying that. Yes?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I think I would like to start with that education as a site to address gender-based violence is to be seen uniquely as opposed to other institutions or spaces where we look at gender-based violence. Because education is not just the site which is perpetuating and normalizing violence, but it is also a site which can create a lot of opportunity to change the way gender-based violence is understood or perpetuated. So the potential of education is equally important to recognize when we talk about gender-based violence in education. And education is also a space for a lot of creation and innovation to look at gender-based violence differently and also define it differently for all of us. And I will talk about it as I move on, that how we need to also expand the idea of gender-based violence, particularly in the context of education, but we also have to start looking at it differently as we engage with it. So I think my whole of the presentation is pegged around this potential of education to address gender-based violence. So I think we all have been talking about homophobic bullying or cyberbullying or violence that happens in education. But I would particularly like to bring in two aspects here, that in the context of India, India is not only divided in the on the lines of gender, but we have many other identity-based divisions and thus violence perpetuated because of it. One of it is caste-based violence, and caste-based violence where oppressed castes face violence not only in school but in order to access school. So I think when we are looking at violence in the context of education, we cannot just limit our focus on what is happening in the education as a space, but also what is happening as a result of when people are trying to access education as a space. And in that context comes the domestic violence also, because a lot of time girls and women, when they try to access educational spaces, and this happens a lot when women come for skill education, when women come for adult education. We just heard about pregnant adolescents, when girls get married early, and when they try to access education, they also face domestic violence. So I think we need to expand this idea that violence in education is not just violence in spaces of education, but also violence because they are trying to access education. I think likewise, other minority groups, whether they are tribal communities or religion-based minorities, they also face violence because they are in school spaces which are designed for a certain kind of caste and class. And when they come to these spaces, they face violence, not just violence, but they also face discrimination. I mean, who sits in front, who sits in the back, who is served how teachers are relating to them, what is teachers' relationship with the students, is all based on what kind of caste, religion, or different identities these students inhibit. So I think these are also important issues that we would like to be part of. And I think when we talk about the strategic interventions, we need to be mindful of these realities, how these unfold in the spaces of education. And in the context of corporal punishment, I would particularly like to say that, especially in the Indian context, uh, corporal punishment happens more for male students because it is believed that they are the one who are indisciplined and they cannot be disciplined without physical violence. So girl students or the female learners actually have less violence, and male students face more violence, and I think it will have its own repercussions on the way we address GBV in educational spaces. I think the next important thing I feel is important to consider when we talk about the strategies to address gender-based violence is that the stakeholders are very different in the space where we are trying to address this. It is not only teachers who are part of the system, and teachers are again not just the perpetuators but also the receivers of violence. So that is what really complicates the whole scenario. So not only that teachers are facing violence from each other, sometimes even teachers facing violence from students, then even the learners are of so many age categories, and every age needs a different attention and a different strategy to work towards violence. And even adults, when they are coming to the space, they have different needs and different ways that are needed to address. So I think this stakeholder analysis to me is a very important thing that we need to do when we talk about strategies for gender-based violence. Now coming down to the strategies which we believe are very important, I think some of these are also flagged by other speakers as well. Uh, One is that as we have worked with the school system, and as we are also engaging with the work of men and masculinities, one is that I think violence is very normalized in our communities, in our societies, so in the school space. And unless we are acknowledging and understanding violence, not just gender based violence, but violence as such, I think we will not be able to come to the gender based violence. And this is particularly important to work with boys and men, and in the context of masculinity, because the normalization of violence actually becomes the gender based violence in certain in the gender context. Second, and the important thing that actually a lot of people have already talked about, is textbooks and the content of that textbook, and how violence is actually again put in as a very is an acceptable way in which discipline happens. And violence also is justified. So unless violence is not justified and completely seen as something which is not acceptable no matter what, I think we'll continue to deal with violence as we see outside and within the system. So textbooks and its content plays a very important role. And actually there are studies also, there is a study which is also done at the South Asia level to look at the gender and gender based violence, and textbooks across region have been seen normalizing and accepting violence as a way of punishment or corrective strategy for disciplining. So I think this is also the way textbooks have perpetuated violence in a certain way. The other important way in which I think GBV needs to be addressed is the very way gender norms are constructed in the school. So, unless we are looking at how femininity and masculinities are constructed, and how all non binary ways of living and being are rejected or met with resistance, we will not be able to come to the issues of gender based violence, because the very root of gender based violence is the very idea that gender is to be experienced and performed in a certain way. So unless we are addressing that, but that the very idea of what is gender and what are gender norms and how these can be challenged, and school actually is a very very potential space to do that, because other than family and community, if any institution has that potential, it is the school. So school has that transformatory potential where gender norms needs to be challenged and reimagined to address gender based violence. I think based on our experience in India, we have been fighting for it for a long time. But comprehensive sexuality education, which is still not accepted, but we feel is very, very important to address gender based violence, because a lot of gender based violence actually is stem into the understanding and actually not understanding, but misunderstanding of sexuality, its norms, and how children experience and want to express themselves, but there is no space to talk about it, to talk about their doubts, their dilemmas, their confusions, and of course misunderstandings. um, Teachers training is another very very important aspect, and based on Nirantar's experience of working on textbooks curriculum development, we have realized no matter how good the textbooks are, unless teachers are equipped to handle those issues, unless a teacher themselves understand what is violence, what is gender, how to address gender related issues in their classroom situations, how to address issues of sexuality as they come across, because when they are working with learners, they are coming across these issues, but they do not know how to address them. So training and investing in teachers capacity to do this is very very important. And lastly, as per our experience, we feel that it is not enough to have robust policies to address gender-based violence or to protect children or learners in the school system. I think it is equally important to see that how these policies are implemented in these spaces, and what is the accountability of policy implementers to make sure that these policies are implemented in a certain way, but at the same time, the policy implementation is not just limited to punishing people, but school as a space again is to be seen as space for reform, space for transformation. And a lot of violence which is perpetuated in these spaces is also by children who are still learning, who are still growing. I think even when we bring these policies to address violence in school spaces, we must be aware of that these are still learners who are learning, and the idea is not to punish them, but to reform them. But we do not see that kind of approach being used in school spaces, and the larger framework is always about punishing if there are cases which come out. And I think that also impinges on how cases are being reported. Uh, yeah, so I think these are some of the points that I feel are important, and given Nirantar's experience, and like I said, India doesn't have a very organized or structured campaign on these issues, but these are some of the learnings that I have tried to capture based on the work of Nirantar and the partner organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Archana. Really some eye-opening, and as you said, it's like different layers. One, of course, the victims of the violence, the sites of the violence, the power relations based on caste, class, religion, sexual orientation. So all matters a lot, and these are some of the things that we really need to consider when we are strategizing. And thank you for sharing your comments, your experience of working on gender-based violence in education in India. And I'm sure everybody will find it really helpful and resourceful. So thank you again. From here, we have really heard about like till now 4 presentations, and I'm sure there are certain comments, inputs, queries that are coming in your mind. At this point, I will request my colleague Thea Soriano again to come and initiate the interactive forum. So, Thea?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Susmita, and excellent presentations from all our speakers. And we have noted how much the work of our ASBE members have progressed since we had the meeting in Delhi last February. Thank you so much. And now we're going to get feedback from participants again. And we can see from the participants, there are amongst us National Education Coalition representatives. We also have youth representatives, representative from Nirantar, the feminist organization, and our colleague from GPE. So most of us, yes, and of course from Afghanistan, ANECO, we also have a participant. And we would like to ask you, having heard the 2 presentations and also from the earlier presentations, we will have a Mentimeter and we will ask you, what do you think are thinking about your own country context, whether you are in school, in the community, or working for policy advocacy at the national level, looking at all of this context, what do you think would be effective strategies in combating gender-based violence in education? And when we say education, it can be community learning centers also, it can be schools, it can be technical vocational institutes, and it can also be the spaces going to the schools and the learning establishments. So if you go into your, in the chat, you will see the link to the Mentimeter, and the code, you will also see the code there. So just click on the link that Lei has given in the chat, and you will go to the Mentimeter, and please respond to this question. You can put in your phrases or words, up to 5 words you can put in one response, and you can put in as many responses as you can. So let's see, your perspectives on what are effective strategies in combating gender-based violence in education. So let's give ourselves 1 minute to do this. Okay. Okay, we can see that the responses are now coming in. Please add more responses to the question. Okay, any more responses? Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And you can keep on writing on the board on Mentimeter. And I would just like to call your attention to the common issues or common strategies that we find are very effective. And before going to the Mentimeter, I'd like to read Parvis of Aneko said that gender should be included in the curriculum of school, in the curriculum of teacher training colleges. Yes, that's right. And this has been echoed also by many of our members in Asia Pacific. And if we look at the screen, we can see that many of us said that awareness raising is very important. Yeah, awareness raising, whether it's the parents, the young people themselves, the girls, the women, and also LGBTQI, awareness raising among the teachers. Yes, awareness raising is really very important. And next, among us, we said that curriculum review is very important. Yes, so you can see curriculum review is as big as social media advocacy. Yes, we have seen how social media advocacy can be a powerful tool to challenge, perspectives of masculinity, perspectives of femininity, and also a lot of gender-based violence happening in our midst. And then teachers training, comes as forth for many of us. We know that teachers should be at the center of the gender inclusive curriculum. So they should know also not only how to teach a gender inclusive content, but also how to manage the classroom, for example. So we have seen how teachers themselves would advise, LGBTQI, and they will caution them and say, hey, you should not be like that. You should be more a girl or a boy, So teachers are at the forefront. So they should be trained in terms of managing the classroom and also reacting and guiding the students themselves. And from the chat, we can also see Flora Aureliano said that we should ensure gender mainstreaming of gender equality in policies, in among the people, in programs and projects. That's right. From our strategies, we can see that policies is included, but a few, yeah, okay, then policies is also a little bigger than the others. But the small text we can see, and I would like to reiterate, young people said we need safe space to discuss because in the young people's experiences, there is no space for them to discuss about the gender issues, and even if they experience gender violence. Okay, so cooperate with government, you also said, a very important early warning system. How do we put that in place? How do we prevent also gender-based violence in education spaces? Okay, thank you so much. And Susmita says we should engage children and youth. Thank you so much to our dear participants for sharing your perspectives on what effective strategies we should be doing in our own context. But we can see that these strategies across Asia Pacific are very common. And some strategies are addressing different policies, government responsibility, but also responsibility from, from our end, also the teachers, the students, the young people, and also NGOs. And us working in civil society, we also have an obligation to ensure that gender-based violence in education is eliminated. So now we go to our next speaker, and all the way from Kyrgyzstan, we have with us our colleague from AED, and Masuma Bashirova. She is the national coordinator of AED, Alliance for Educational Development in Kyrgyzstan. Yes, and she will, and the AED also is one of the collaborator in our work on gender-based violence in education, and she will share with us the lessons from Kyrgyzstan on addressing gender-based violence in education. So Masuma, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Claire. I will share my screen now. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes, we
now.
can see it, but
and,
can you put it?
yeah.
Okay.
This one. Wow.
Okay, so now we can see it in presentation mode. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to share our experiences among our study, which we conducted last year. Our organization is not so experienced as previous presentators, but we start to deal with these issues, deal with gender-based violence in education. First, I want to talk 2 words about context in Kyrgyzstan. Despite the significant steps taken in Kyrgyzstan to achieve gender equality, this issue remains relevant for the country still. In our country remains a significant gender gaps in economic participation, as well as persistent and deeply rooted patriarchal attitudes, stereotypes, and practices regarding gender roles and high levels of gender-based violence. You can see in my slides the statistics and of the numbers of the applicants based on the violence, and especially in the domestic violence. According to the data of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the numbers of victims of domestic violence increased for 5 times in the last year. And so from this data, we can see that 95% of these victims are women, and 3% are children and adolescents. Violence has a devastating impact on children, and in addition to the immediate risk to their lives and physical health, violence poses a threat to children's emotional well-being and future prospects, and also its influence to the access children to the education. According to the study which conducted by UNICEF in 2018 in Kyrgyzstan, nearly 33% of children are victims of child abuse and neglect at home. More than 80% of students in 55 schools survived across the country have experienced violence at school. And ID, the next slide. Okay, as I mentioned before, I did conduct a study on conduct the study in the gender-based violence in the school. The criteria of the study is that we wanted to assess what is the capacity of the administrative and teacher staff in the schools, especially in the public schools and especially in rural areas. 3 areas in the south part of the country was identified, and we use the multi-research method during our study. We conduct focus group discussion with the children in the 7 and 9 grades, and also with their parents. And also we made interviews, deep interviews with all stakeholders which deal with the gender issues in the education. We invite to interview the local authorities, also the administration of the school, teachers, and also experts. And now the key findings of this study. The atmosphere in a school is not always friendly to children. And there is some factors which mention that the gender-based violence is in the high level in our schools, especially in rural areas. Different views of stakeholders on the problem on gender-based violence in the school. The responses from the local authorities mention that there's no problem in the gender-based violence in the school. As the opposite of them, the teachers mentioned that there is a lot of facts of gender-based violence in the school, especially as a part of the boys. And it's concerned not on the environment in the school, but also in the road when they return and go to the school. The parents mentioned also that there is a lot of facts, and they perceive that there is no psychological support for the children in the school. As the experts also mentioned that there is no preventions to this gender-based violence in school. Another findings is about the stereotypes and practices regarding gender roles and gender-based violence among parents and teachers. We make online surveys for teachers, and directors of the web schools. In our country, web schools is more popular between the more marginalized family because it is free of charge. And when we ask about the stereotypes and about the awareness about the gender's roles in family, in work, in politics, it was a very interesting findings that more than half of the respondents say that mentioned that more than half 50% they convinced that there is no that support stereotypical attitude that reinforces the subordinated positions of the woman in the family, tolerant of violence, and non-acceptance of women politicians. More than 68 agreed that every woman should take care of only of the home and cook for her family. And more than half of the respondents are convinced that a man should have a most leader in decision maker in the family. And also, it was very strange that the teachers, 31% of the teachers agreed that in some cases it is acceptable to beat a woman, and 20% believe that a woman must suffer violence to keep her family. And the other one was a lack of psychological support services for children subjected to violence in schools. Children during the focus group discussion mentioned that there is no people with whom they can discuss these issues because they're afraid of their parents, they're afraid of the teachers and administration. And this is one of the cause why the children go out from school.
And so the next was the low capacity of the administration and teachers in matters of gender-based violence and measures to prevent it. More than half of the respondents never visited the training to the issues of genders, and more than 20% of the respondents say that they have such kinds of trainings, but it was more than 5 or 7 years ago. Lesson learned. What we learned from our survival. First of all, the gender-based violence, regardless of age, social or geographical location or cultures, is a serious human rights violation. Why we choose these rural areas and why we choose this in the south part of our republic? Because the migrants, the rates of migrants is very high in our country, and especially in these areas. And the children from these migrants family, they often have this gender violence from the sides of their relatives and also in the school. A school and any other education institution which was supposed to be a safe and accessible space for all can become a place where children and young people are exposed to various forms of gender violence. Unfortunately, this type of violence in most cases goes undetected and unpunished in our country and also in our families. Poverty or belonging to a marginalized group increases the likelihood of becoming a victim of violence in school and educational institution. And it was mentioned by the children, in spite they are so young, the 7th grades and 9th grades, but they understood that poverty is the one of the case when one of the case to become a victim of GBV. Gender-based violence in the school environment is a serious obstacle to achieving the goal of universal school enrollment and realizing the right of everyone to education. And lesson learned, in other words, that we have to highlight that national and local authorities must pay great attention in combating gender-based violence and all forms of violence in school and education institutions. It's necessary to develop and implement policies and national action plans to create safe, violence-free and accessible educational space for all learners. And it's have to be not on the public school and not in the formal education, but also in informal, also in the center of training adults, in the training of additional education. Because there is no data about how many cases of gender-based violence was in this space also. Important to raise awareness of bullying and violence among school children, as well as teachers, parents, and local community members. And promotion of transformative society norms and values that respect diversity and human rights and support dialogue and non-violent means on conflict resolution. And my last slide is about our vision and our attitude to these issues. I named it that let's start. We start to hire the awareness of the local authorities and local and administration and teachers in the local areas, in the village. And we started with participating in the company 16 days against the violence to the girls and women. We make a lot of informal sessions, and when we speak and talk about these issues with the students of the university, with the children, with the teachers, and we find out the lack of the information and a lack of this capacity, not only on the teacher side, but also the lack of the understanding, full understanding among the students who studies in the pedagogical university and psychological faculty. So we make also a lot of social media, and we see that this issue is very interesting among the population of local populations. So we decided to continue this work and to make more forces to to raise the awareness of all stakeholders who deal with education in the national and then the local level. Thank you for attention.
Thank you so much, Masuma. I think this is really excellent work that you have done. And I remember your comment that when you started doing gender-based violence in education, when you're thinking about GBV in education, you thought that, oh, there's no problem in our education system because girls are participating, women have high levels of education. But when you went deeper into, gender issues within the education system, you said that indeed in Kyrgyzstan there is a lot to be done in terms of ensuring gender equality in education. And this is really excellent work that, oh, so sorry. This is really excellent work that you have been doing in Kyrgyzstan. So thank you so much, Masuma. Okay, so colleagues, let's give Masuma a big round of applause, and you can use your emoji, the clap emoji on your screen. Thank you so much. So now we go into, before we're almost going to a closing, but let us have our photo. And I would like to ask colleagues to please turn on your video for our photo. Yeah. Okay, great. Great to see you. Okay, good. And you're here. We thought you left already. And yeah, Archana, thank you for being with us. And also nice to see everyone coming from different sub-regions. Okay, so over to Baz to give us the instructions for a photo. Oh, okay, nice to meet you, Kanako Omi. Okay.
Let's wait for a bit. Nishi, Roland, come and join us to our group photo. Abdullah, Australia, Gali. So we have 2 pages. Okay, let's start at the first page. Keep on smiling, everyone. Okay, 1. Okay, let's wait for Rajiv. He's coming in. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay, some are still joining. One more. 1, 2, 3. And last one, because we have 2 pages. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Buds, as always, for your technical support to ASBE. Very important. Okay, colleagues, if you like, you can keep on turning your video. We are almost at the end of our excellent session, in fact. So we have heard, as I mentioned, our members have participated in February in Delhi for our sharing on gender-based violence in education. But this is really excellent, and we have seen how, we have gone more deeply into the issues of gender-based violence in education in our society. So I would like to, to ask participants, do you have a reflection? We can have one reflection on this session. If you like to speak, you can raise your hand. Yeah. Anyone who would like to share a reflection? Okay, anyone? Yeah. Parviz. Okay, over to you, Parviz, for your reflection. Yes, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the very nice and informative presentations. They were very useful. And I would like to reflect on 2 very important issues. As we witness, we have laws in all the countries, but still we have gender violence at the schools. In my opinion, school principals should be made accountable. They should report regularly and conduct regular violence risk assessment and report regularly to Directorate of Education. There should be specific gender subjects at the schools. In teacher training colleges, they should teach teachers how to behave with the students. There should be gender curriculum. So these are what we think as very key issues, because gender violence happens at the schools. And if we have gender informed students and gender issues informed teachers, so we can decrease it drastically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Parviz, for sharing your reflections on our discussions. And just to reiterate Parviz reflections, today we have listened to how we have done policy advocacy, how important it is, policy advocacy, and at the national level and also at the school level. We have seen how national education coalitions have done, advocacy and have been very successful in revising the code of conduct for teachers and other policies within their schools. In our systems approach advocacy, we have also seen our work around curriculum development, rethinking our curricula towards making the curricula gender inclusive and promoting gender equality. You have also mentioned the work around awareness raising, which we say is very important. Awareness raising with different stakeholders in our school and also in our community, including awareness raising amongst the local governments, because they themselves should know how they can enforce policies against gender-based violence and violence in general. We have also seen how young people have been engaging the schools, and also the parents. So one strategy also is empowering the girls, the young women, LGBTQI on their rights, so that they can speak out against violence, not only in education, but violence in general. But I would like us to put more pressure on mechanisms, because we think this is one weak area in gender-based violence, addressing gender-based violence. And in the Mentimeter, one participant, or maybe it could be two participants, one area is early warning system. We found out that in schools and even in the communities, the mechanisms to address gender-based violence are very weak. How do we claim gender justice? For example, if you're a victim or you're a survivor of gender violence, or if you experience gender violence, where do you go? And if we speak out, how are authorities, handling these cases? And we have also seen in our GBV in education work that, as Archana said, there is normalization of violence. And even those who experience violence, they accept violence. And we have seen, in the schools, because of power relations between the students and the teachers, the students, there's a tendency to keep quiet when they experience gender violence. And even parents, because of shaming and blaming, there is a tendency, there's a culture of silence when we talk about gender violence in school and in the community. And therefore, in this area, we have to increase our advocacy around mechanisms, early warning system. We have to increase our work around awareness raising, and also how the authorities are handling these cases around gender-based violence. Colleagues, we have a lot to do, but we had an excellent start and continuing work on addressing gender-based violence in education. And at this point, I would like to thank, on behalf of ASBE, I would like to thank all the four organizations who have initiated this work. I'd like to thank Nirantar Trust, a feminist organization in India, and also AED Kyrgyzstan, a national education coalition in Kyrgyzstan. Thank you, ENET Philippines. As always, you have done excellent work. And also thank you to All for Education Mongolia. Thanks a lot. We know that this area of work is really very difficult, but you have persisted in the work. And also thank you so much to all our youth constituents who have contributed. We know that this area of work is very sensitive, but you have contributed much of your experiences to inform our policy advocacy and our work on gender-based violence. So we will continue to bring this policy recommendations, at the country level. You are doing this already, but at the regional and global level, we will push duty bearers and stakeholders towards understanding more and doing urgent actions around gender-based violence. And last of all, thank you to you, all participants who have been there. And thank you also to our technical support buds. And thank you, everyone, for being with us in this session. Okay. Okay, so have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Thea.